I'm going to introduce another member of our team here, Pat Noyes from Pat Noyes and Associates, and she's going to talk about um, this important topic as well.
Thank you, Eric. And I really want to thank Secretary Wilson for his comments, because it just parallels so many of the things that we found looking across industries in terms of the challenges and some of the ideas that were offered or generated out of the other industries that we think we can build on in terms of moving workforce forward within TSMO. So what we looked at was really just a quick look at some of the key documents or efforts that have been coming out of some similar industries: water, information technology, accounting, and trucking. And some of them have some really distinct parallels. For example, water in particular, some of the challenges that were identified by the EPA in their America's Water Sector Workforce Initiative, a call to action, some of the challenges that they identified really parallel what we see in TSMO, that workforce is vital to sustaining a very critical infrastructure, which, they're working with water and wastewater, we're working with transportation and really the arterial system of the economy. So it's a similar infrastructure need. There's a shortage of employees that everybody's facing right now, not only in terms of incoming, but also in terms of retirement, that they're anticipating that over the next 5 to 10 years, a very large proportion of their workforce will be retiring. Similarly, the infrastructure itself is aging, and then there are increases in the complexity, the technology, information systems that they're using for quality control, we're using for performance management. And so there are, and again, as we talked a little bit about on Monday, cybersecurity issues. There are all kinds of new and emerging challenges that really require a new workforce within the water and wastewater industry. So what the EPA has recommended is that there be some federal leadership in terms of building partnerships across agencies to develop some guidance, some support documentation, some education and outreach, and particularly they're looking at how can they make water a career of choice. And certainly that is something I think that NOCO and the TSMO community all want to do as well in terms of trying to engage and recruit new talent. The next one that we looked at was the IT industry. And the Federal CIO Council developed the Future of Federal IT Workforce Update. They looked at 5 primary issue areas, which are the 5 things in the middle that sort of parallel what we've been talking about on Monday, which is recruit, retain, reskill, augment, and measure. And then they looked at that in terms of how the 5 drivers of the IT future workforce interact and interplay with those 5 primary issue areas. And so they're really looking at those in terms of how they shape the workforce. And they came out with a set of recommendations or actions to move that forward. So going to the next 2 slides, the next slide is the first set of information technology recommendations that they wanted to move forward to support workforce development in IT. And I think a lot of these can be directly applied or adapted within the TSMO workforce. So this is a federal CIO group. So this is a government-wide special IT pay system. But a lot of these can be translated into an industry-wide approach for how we can build our workforce as well. So going to the next slide, the next set of recommendations, I think, some of the things we heard even yesterday, pilot programs and ways that we can engage new folks in or transfer them over between industries or areas of specialty within our industry. So then going to the next slide, and I'm going through this very quickly because you do have the case study that has a little bit more detail in it for you. The next area we looked at was in accounting, and particularly in the area of diversity. The recruitment and retention toolkit that was developed by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. They have a National Commission on Diversity and Inclusion. And so they published this toolkit that really looks at what can be done within the industry to create a more diverse workforce in accounting. Accounting is not unlike the engineering world that we've worked in for many years, and it is not as diverse as some others. The role of leadership is absolutely critical in helping create a culture that enhances and supports diversity. Understanding why it's important in terms of diversity of the profession. For example, ITS America and the RAY and Women's Transportation Seminar, WTS, have gotten together in a new initiative called Mobility XX that is looking specifically at women in the workforce, which make up, I think, 15% currently of the ITS workforce, and they are undertaking an initiative to increase that by 10% over the next 10 years. So they're really looking at how we can do a similar kind of thing to understand the importance of diversity and meeting the needs of the traveling public. They've included in their toolbox a variety of tools that will help in terms of recruitment and retention and inclusion and creating a better workforce environment. And then finally, in trucking, I think trucking has some parallels, particularly within our paraprofessional arena, where they are facing many of the same challenges that we are facing in TSMO. They have a very high turnover rate. It is a stressful work environment, as I think Secretary Wilson was talking about the stress of working within the field services, similar stressful environment and potentially high turnover rate, aging employee base, issues with wages and wage competition, issues and challenges with getting CDLs, commercial driver's licenses, and the process that drivers have to go through for that, and then needs to support new drivers through mentoring and apprenticeship. So some of those challenges that they're facing, they really are coming up with some solutions as an industry that are similar to some of the things I think we talked about and we'll talk about today. So some of the key takeaways from these four industries that I think apply particularly well within TSMO are in recruiting, retention, and diversity. So looking particularly at recruiting right now, two areas that really kind of bubbled up were cooperation between TSMO and HR. And that is, how can we work with our HR folks to address some of these things through simplification of application and hiring, recruiting outside of our traditional recruiting areas in terms of trying to attract new talent and new KSAs, and then trying to align ourselves a little bit more in terms of what we offer within our industry, align them a little bit more with what's being done in other industries. And then again, as Secretary Wilson talked about, this sense of purpose and social good is absolutely key to making transportation a career of choice. And so we really need to develop a social case for TSMO, and we need to develop some case studies that really highlight the importance of the work that we do within the transportation community. So at the next slide, some of the retention takeaways looked at career mobility, culture of innovation, and flexibility and work environment. Some of those include how we create some movement and some cross-functional training within our existing positions. How do we develop career paths for non-traditional transportation positions so that those positions can move up into greater leadership opportunities in the future. Culture of innovation, really making the transportation industry a lot more innovation friendly and embrace some of the rapid technology changes and emerging technologies that are out there, and flexibility in the work environment. A lot of younger workers care much more about flexibility and culture and the sense of where they work than traditional workers have. And so really looking at how we can make a more flexible and worker-friendly environment. One of the things that came out of the accounting effort was this conduct stay interviews. We do a lot of exit interviews, but it's very helpful to understand why people are currently staying in their jobs and not leaving. So conducting stay interviews is in addition to exit interviews, I think would be very informative. And then finally, diversity, equity, and inclusion takeaways. We've talked about some of these, but really building this culture of diversity and inclusion, creating support opportunities through apprenticeships, mentoring, and sponsorship programs, targeting outreach and recruiting to non-traditional either colleges, universities, or different industries that we can start reaching out to and recruiting from, and collaborating with underrepresented groups within our industry. So those are some of the key takeaways. There's a little bit more detail on this in the case study. I think we can talk about them all a little bit more in our breakout groups if they're appropriate to some of the ideas for moving forward.